Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of No Rest for the Wicked. So for those on across it, I do overviews and reviews pretty much daily here on the channel, and in the case of an overview, it's where I just have a look at the first 2 hours of a game, which is the Steam refund window. Steam thinks you can make your mind up in 2 hours about whether you want to keep or refund a game, and I kind of agree. I feel that 20 hours in, you're not going to change your mind if you didn't like the game 2 hours in. So these are short, punchy, under 10 minutes, give you the broad strokes ideas, and it helps me triage what I will and won't go and review going forward, because there's only so many hours in the day. So, straight off the bat, I like it. I had a few sort of prickly issues. I guess as a fan of Moon Studios, I went in with biases. I try and leave them at the door. It is different. And for whatever reason, it took a little bit more for it to click, but by the end of my 2 hours with it, I'm actually really thoroughly sucked in, and I would like to play some more. So there's a bit of a curve to it, or a gradient. Let's start with that. Moon Studios, they are known for making the Ori games, and Ori, especially the first one, might be one of my top 10 favorite games of all time. Just resonates really well with me, and I'm not even someone who traditionally, you would say, enjoys Metroidvanias, or actually has a history with them before Ori, and that turned me onto that genre. I loved it, and it's kind of a masterclass of managing that sort of layout and back and forth and running around. Now this is a departure, but funnily enough, the more I think about it, the more I realize it's kind of is just an Ori game, but they've tweaked some other stuff to it. The way that it's sort of being touted and pitched is as like a Dark Souls type game, and that's absolutely true in that sort of isometric angle, but you can still feel a lot of the studio tendencies that they laid out in Ori, and they've brought a lot of that stuff across, and there's an argument about whether some of it actually lands. I suppose at a base level you could say if you just take a genre mechanic out of one genre and put it into another genre, there's actually a fair to decent chance that it doesn't really work. And so that's probably my deepest criticism on this game, is that some of the stuff that when you get onto that thought process and pull that thread and go, oh, they did this in Ori, but it worked in Ori for many reasons, which we can go into, but we don't want to go too long. They're also doing a few different things with the way that the Souls-like combat plays. I'm using my hands, as I always do, but I came to realize, I had to think about it, right? I love a good Dark Souls game. Everyone does, Souls-likes, whatever. There's a reason they're so popular. They kind of, they challenge you, in a way they present you with an onion and challenge you to peel all the layers off and figure it out and break it and crack it and make you a build. There is something antagonistic and challenging about a Dark Souls type game. And this has that here, sort of trying to crack the code, figure out how the game works, and it's quite fun. So it has all the staples of stat management, stat lines, weight classes, that sort of thing, but it does a few things different. The biggest one that I had to really think about is, I would describe the combat flow state more like a concertina, which is to say almost in and out along a singular axis. So there's a lot of diving in to fight and diving back. And I don't necessarily think that this is just my personal way that I'm playing it. I think some of the movesets are built very much around it, like sprint attacks feature a lot more heavily here than maybe, say, a Dark Souls moveset. But more importantly, the way that the weight dodge system works, if you're not across it somehow, I know I'm going on a lot of assumed knowledge, but in a Souls-like game, you have weight capacity of your weapons and your armor, and generally you will have subdivided, I'm using my hands again, subdivided weight restriction areas. So if you're in the bottom third and you're running with light armor and daggers or something, you're going to be quite quick on your feet, and your iframes, your roll animation, all of this stuff is going to be essentially better, right, for lack of a better term. And then as you move all the way up to Fatty Boomba in full plate and heavy weapons, you like fall on the ground if you try and roll. It becomes not really feasible. I know this is a lot of suck eggs if you're a bit of a veteran of the season, but that's the Soldier's 5 on how it works. In this game, you have 3 categories, which is light, medium, and heavy. And interestingly enough, the roll state, what I would probably argue the ideal roll state, is in the medium slot. In the heavy slot, you do have a slower roll, and I'm kind of rolling heavy, which is unusual for me. I'm actually usually very, very fast and punchy in Souls-like games. I'm giving the heavy two-handed a go. So very, very different, but I'm very satisfied with it. You can actually do like a shoulder charge thing. So this is really interesting. For a change, you are incentivized, hypothetically, to go into the heavy armor as opposed to just hard penalize. The handshake agreement has always been, if you're wearing heavy armor, your roll just sucks. That's how it works. And while, yes, it still sucks here, you can use the bumpers to shoulder charge dudes and sort of body check them, which is really cool. So that's cool that a moveset unlocks the heavier your armor, and it makes sense. And on the other end of the scale, the light moveset, you don't roll. You actually have this really monstrous sort of straight line dodge. That sort of lends credence to my theory that the game kind of wants you to fight in a concertina fashion, as opposed to, I would argue, Dark Souls is more rotational. There's a lot of sort of rotating around each other. If you are trying to get around for a backstab or flank, you're trying to roll through or around, but there is this sort of orbital motion to the way that you fight your target in Souls-like games, at least in my experience. And yeah, with this, especially in the super light moveset, it is very much about jump forward in, stab, jump back. And the bosses are quite aggressive, and a lot of the enemies as well, at these very straight line, hard jumps onto you. I hope I'm describing this well, but it's one of those things that in motion, it took a while for me to figure out that it feels different. What is it that's different? And it seems to be this, what I would call concertina fight rhythm. It's not bad, it's just different, and you got to get used to it. And honestly, if they just gave us more of the exact same thing, Dark Souls clones, then, people wouldn't want that either. So some people you just can't please. The issues that I talked about coming across from Ori are multiple. Example, the art style, you can see it's very unique, and you have these sort of really warped body shapes, big gorilla arms and little legs and all that. Now, I get the art style that they're going for, and one could actually argue it's similar if you think back to Ori, but Ori were like animals of the forest, so it wasn't quite so jarring that it wasn't humans with these unusual body shapes or anything like that. So you can see the artistic styling and general sort of direction that was in the Ori games that's come across here. But because, like I said, they've put it on humans, they've put it in like a human castle setting, that sort of thing, it is a bit jarring. It doesn't really have that wholesome quality, and they're not really necessarily going for wholesome. So they've kind of brought this wholesome art direction across to a kind of miserable, grimdark, almost bordering on horror, medieval infection fantasy thing, right? So you can sort of see what I mean. You see the stuff, you see Ori in there, but you also go, it doesn't work quite as well. Other things would be the way that there is almost a lot of Metroidvania exploration components to it, given the change in camera angle, more so than, say, a Souls-like game. Now, the weakest thing in most Souls games is the puzzle platforming. It just generally isn't very good. There's a little bit for secrets, and I don't have enough time in this video to really go deep in it, but because of this forced isometric camera, you're sort of operating in 2 planes, 2.5 planes. So it's not Ori. It's not actually strictly 2 planes of a side scroller, because there's a lot of verticality in this game, a lot of climbing up and down things and walking on balancing beams over ravines, and the fall damage is actually quite punishing. So again, you can sort of feel this puzzle platform kind of back and forth mentality coming across, and it doesn't work quite so well just because of the nature of the beast, nature of the camera angles, the way the environment is laid out. I found myself falling off a lot of stuff or missing something, and even just having backgrounds blending in with objects as well. And again, the best touchstone I can think of is, Ori, it's very much a painterly background, and interactable objects are kind of in the foreground, almost like Resident Evil texturing from the old school games. Anyway, so my point is, it's not without its issues. And I would actually argue some of these things that they've brought across, they just don't work. I'm not necessarily saying that they're bad. I'm saying more that they worked better in the Ori games and they don't really work here. But, as I said, I'm really falling in love with this game. I'm really quite enjoying it. The story's taking its time. It's not really clear what's really going on. I don't want to spoil it or anything like that. I've just beaten the first boss and he was tough, but really fun and fair. Really had to, again, I'm doing like a double claymore super heavy build. Really had to watch that stamina bar. Even if you're in a light build, the stamina bar is really punishing in this game. You can't spam. right? You can barely do a full combo chain. You put in 1 or 2 jabs and then you dodge out. There's parries, there's blocks, there's all that sort of crap in there as well. But that's the one thing I would sort of caution going in, that this game is actually kind of super difficult around stamina management. You can't quite get away with what you might in a Souls-like game. It seems your stamina bar it's hard to tell at a glance, but it looks like it goes into debt. You have a stamina circle around your character. And so say you try and do a roll, let's say it would use up 20 stamina and you only have 5 stamina. It looks like the circle actually goes another 15 stamina around into the red and then has to recharge out of that, which is interesting. You can't, I think normally it would be if you just don't have the stamina, you don't have the stamina, but now it pushes your bar into kind of a debt and you have a longer cooldown. It's very interesting. It's a cool game. I like it so far. Early days, broad stroke takes, but again, if you're coming in this expecting another Ori game, temper your expectations. If you're going into this thing, it's going to be a straight Dark Souls, temper your expectations as well. It's doing some very, very different stuff. But I think what it is doing is pretty cool. And there's a fair to decent chance that I actually go deeper and I review it. All right, team. Thanks again for joining me. I might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.